This is Kathryn Goetzke, host of the Hope Matrix podcast. We are here to share science, stories, and strategies for how to hope. I'm the Chief Hope Officer of the Shine Hope Company, and Shine is the mnemonic for how we teach hope. So when we talk about hope, we talk about how we use stress skills, happiness habits, inspired actions, nourishing networks, and eliminating challenges, which are our thinking patterns that get in the way of our ability to hope. Hope is a skill. You can measure hope, you can teach hope, and you can start practicing skills to activate higher hope in your life today. And on this Hope Matrix podcast, we aim to bring in guests, experts in science, people with stories, and those that have strategies for activating hope in your life.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. This is Katharine Goetzke, host of the Hope Matrix podcast. Super excited to have you all today. We have some really incredible guests. So that is a plural. We have multiple guests today, which I'm thrilled to be doing, which was Katharine's idea, which was one of the three guests. We're here today talking to a family about hope. And it's a family that I love dearly. I met Lee-Kramer as one of our guests, and he is with Johnson & Johnson. I met him. He's doing incredible global mental health advocacy work, and we've traveled really around the world together doing some work. It seems like a while since we've been out there, but we're here today to talk to Craig and his two children, Katharine and Peter, whom I both know as well. Katharine's done some work for Hopeful Minds, which is our K-6 program. And then Peter, I just know through Craig. He's, been really vocal about his own kind of experience with mental health and done a lot of advocacy. So I'm thrilled to have them both, or all three of them, here today. So welcome today, everyone. Great to see you all.
You too. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a while. Probably since pre-pandemic. So it's great to see you live and in person, or not in person, but in Zoom. And welcome. So welcome today. I wanted to start by just having you all share a little bit about what you're doing right now, where you're at, and what you're working on. Maybe Craig, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Katharine. And this is fun to have the family together on a podcast. See how it goes. Maybe it'll be a sort of a trend.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still working at Johnson & Johnson as the mental health ambassador. And that gives me the opportunity to work globally. These days, mostly on Zoom, but we're just in New York and head down to Alabama. And maybe you and I will show up in Geneva at some point, Katharyn Goetzke. But trying to use our platform at Johnson & Johnson as the largest healthcare company to do what we can to help transform mental health care around the world, because it is badly needed still today, maybe even more so today after the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, it's great to see you, and it's great to have you here talking. J&J has done so much incredible work in the field of global mental health. So excited to share a little bit more about that. And why don't we go to you, Peter? What's going on? How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having us. So I just started my first year of my PsyD program at the University of Denver. So I'm in class 3 days a week, and I just started a field placement where I'll be working with adolescents and their families from around the area. And I'll also be seeing clients in our clinic that's based out of our university, out of the School of Professional Psychology. So yeah, I'm just super excited to be getting started down this path. Very anxious to see my first client, but also just excited to keep learning. I feel like there's so much that I have yet to learn. Yeah.
That's amazing. And for our guests, what is PsyD?
PsyD stands for Doctor of Psychology. So in graduate school, PhD is probably the more well-known degree. And then you can get a PhD in any area of psychology, like cognitive psych, clinical psych, counseling psych, and that's usually research-based. And the PsyD is all clinical and practicum based. So I'm essentially training to be I mean, it's not bragging, but like the best version of a therapist by the end. That's like the hopes. Yeah, so it's a lot. Everything is like hands-on. I start seeing clients like within the first quarter of the program. And yeah, don't have to do research.
Wow, that's amazing. Congrats. I'm so happy to
you.
hear that. I'm so happy for you. And let's go to Katharine. So now, Katharine, what are you up to these days?
I'm in the 3rd semester out of 4 for my MSW, so Master's in Social Work. I'm doing full-time class and then also interning at an acute psychiatric hospital. So we'll see. I still don't know what I want to do with my degree, but this has been like a really good learning experience. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Sounds like you're getting good hands-on practical kind of application.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, this is so great to have the 3 of you on here together. It's, you know, the family dynamics of mental health is so interesting, and so much goes on in the family. And I think really proactive kind of mental health strategies start at the home and start with talking about it and being open about it. And that's one thing I've always really admired about Craig is he's very proactive about just, yeah, making sure that health in the home is kind of talked about. So why don't we talk about just kind of lived experience or what the personal kind of experiences each of yours with mental health, if you'd be willing to share more.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. You know, as I was growing up, we didn't talk a lot about mental health. In retrospect, I had some depressive episodes in college, in particular, and really lifelong level of anxiety that kind of was present all the time, and I developed my own ways of dealing with that. But as we've, Katharine, as you and I have gone down this journey together, Kathryn Goetzke and Lee-Kramer, I've discovered that mental health is an issue across my very large extended family, and I really haven't found very few families that aren't touched by it. Since we started this conversation, 7 or 8 years ago, and so it's wonderful to find that I and all 3 of my children, Stephen's not here today, are in the mental health field. Stephen is a chief technology officer for a mental health mobile app company in San Francisco, and we're trying to make a difference in our own ways. But it does come out of that family context, and maybe I'll flip it over to Katharine and Peter to talk about their experience.
You want to take it for me?
You could go.
Well, I've had a lot of mental health struggles since I was 14, and I'm now 33. So my family has done we've done a lot of work together to like what mental health is, how to attack this as a family. And my dad I think he's been a crucial component of this part, but I wouldn't be here today without them. So I appreciate everyone in my family for being educated. It wasn't that way in the beginning for sure, but we've grown a lot. So yeah.
Just to add to that, I think for my own experience, I was living out patterns and just cycles of my life without kind of realizing what was impacting those things. And it got to the point where I thought I was this unfixable mistake of the universe. And then it was learning about my own psychology that taught me that I could change and that there was things I could do, tracking my negative and positive thoughts, constructive, destructive thoughts, and also just doing things that provide me like renewable energy, things that aren't like draining for me. And I think like being involved in something that's been so fulfilling as like pursuing my dream of becoming a therapist is really just added, and I think this is fitting for this podcast. It's added like a lot of hope, and just positivity. And I think from our personal struggles as a family, as individuals within that family, but then collectively as a unit, we've all like really internalized this issue, and I think it speaks for itself, like the things that we've chosen to do with our lives. Yeah, mental health is very important, and I hope we can keep making a difference.
We had a family session, Katharine, once where Peter asked the question, aren't we being hypocritical because our family's such a mess, for us to be out there talking about mental health? And I think upon reflection, we realized that that actually gives us some expertise, having dealt with so many dimensions of this problem. Not that, humbly recognize, we're not perfect, but no family is. And it was kind of a great way for us to think about our how important our role is and how we can use our lived experience to help others.
Absolutely. Yeah. And not only does it impact you, but you're being proactive about managing it. So many families just ignore it and turn to really unhealthy behaviors and patterns that further adds kind of destruction and chaos to their lives. So it's, I think many people can relate to, Peter, what you're saying about feeling broken and not like they fit in and isolated and alone. And so that you're, actually using that to fuel your passions, like your purpose in this world is really, that is something we know about hope, that can really help maintain and fuel our hope. If we use some of our pains to move kind of the world forward in a way that we would like to kind of see embraced. So it's wonderful that you're doing that. And that again, the family is kind of proactively managing it. I remember sitting at your table and just kind of us all talking about just mental health. And I think, Craig, to your point so long ago, that wasn't what we were doing, and that wasn't what I necessarily grew up with or what we were addressing. So, and we're also learning so much in the field. So we're learning and all evolving in the field of mental health, I think, kind of as we move through it. And Katharine, one of our fourth key to hope is nourishing networks. And so when you talk about the family and the family being there and the support, we know as well that that's kind of that's so important to hope. And I just wanted to expand on that a little bit. What do you think in the family is like, what is helpful responses? So if someone is, if a parent is seeing a child struggle, or, or when you're struggling, Katharine, what's helpful from your brother or your dad? What was, supportive and versus kind of invasive? How do you kind of manage that? What do you think?
So coming from I'm going to talk about when I was younger. So my parents' family weren't well versed in mental health at that point. And I was really struggling with feeding myself. And years later, they were like, we knew what was going on. And I was like, well, why didn't you say something? But it's such a hard, balancing act, I guess, to maintain trust with your kid and then also call them out on what's going on. So I think with younger kids, it's if you see something, say something in a delicate manner, don't be, but I think parents know more than they think they might know. If that makes sense.
I think Katharine put together with her therapist a full care plan. So we are very clear on roles and responsibilities, and kind of things to look for and talk about, both positive things and also kind of detrimental things. And, you know, we continue to learn, we continue to make mistakes. Yeah, that's how we learn, in fact. So, you know, we're not perfect by any measure, and it is kind of a difficult space to navigate. But, you know, Katharine has really sort of taken charge of that care community. And I think that's helped all of us. And she's also, you know, got me back in line a few times when I strayed beyond what my proper and constructive role would be. So I appreciate that, Katharine.
Katharine, is there anything specific that has helped with that your dad has done that's been supportive and that you would recommend to other dads out there?
Totally. I think the lines of communication, like Dad and I are like, if I have something going on, I don't feel hesitant to call my dad. And I know that he will be perceptive, open, supportive, and listen to me with like no judgment. And I think that has been the most important and helpful part of our family dynamic, like the non-judgment. Just, Dad, I can call you anytime, and you just pick up the phone, and it's, yeah.
And Dad, how did you get to that space where I know it must be hard as a dad to
I'm mindful of my flaws. So if Peter and Katharine want to point out where I'm not doing well, that's fine too. Yeah, I think actually we tend to be more introverted in our family, so we're kind of more taking things in and listening. So that's probably just our basic orientation, which may seem odd that we're on this podcast all talking openly about it, but yeah, I think just trying to be curious and understand the world and understanding my own emotional, you know, needs and trying to see what other people need. I mean, yeah, we're you know, when I think about the things I wish I'd never said, there are usually times when I, you know, offer an opinion where I really didn't know what I was talking about. And I think Peter and Katharine could probably point to moments when I said things that I now regret as a parent. But, yeah, I think humility is part of it. And Peter, do you have some insights there?
I think it takes time to get to that no judgment place. I think it's just inevitable that we have judgments, we have feelings, we are humans. And I don't know, I've never had a child, but I imagine it can be very frustrating when you're seeing your child like play out these patterns over and over again, and you feel like there's something that you could do. And I think like the old way of thinking is that we have to like intervene, control the situation, especially if we feel like somebody else is like lacking that control. And I think just through our experience together and just like learning about like empathy and understanding, you put your judgments aside and you listen. The point is that like the support is for the individual who's going through it. And I think for everybody, it looks a little bit different, and you sort of learn like how to best help that individual person. Like if we're talking about me or Katharine, you figure out like what our like the best language of the best way to communicate with us is, like how we think, how we feel about things, and then just act accordingly. Yes, it's I like what they say about psychotherapy. It is an art and a science combined, and I think that could be true for just like family relationships surrounding mental health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, for you, what's been most helpful in terms of support inside the family?
I think, I mean, support is, I don't know, that's just the best way that I can put it. My parents have been so patient and accepting of like the speed bumps that I've hit, for lack of a better word. You know, there was one point in my life where I had to go to court in Western Massachusetts, I don't know, once every 2 weeks, which is like a 5-hour drive. and the court proceedings would last 5 minutes or something, like that short. And my dad would be up with me at like, I don't know, what time do we wake up? Like 4 a.m. to get to court. We'd always stop at the same McDonald's, and like that sort of, he never like asked a question like, do you want me to come? He was just like there, made sure like my suit was ready, that like I looked nice. And then, yeah, just never giving up on us, I think kind of teaches us to not give up on ourselves, because that is like an inclination that I used to have. And I think like having them see us in that positive light and kind of internalizing that for ourselves has been invaluable. Yeah.
So sweet. It's amazing to hear. You all are so connected, and it's really very special. Do you have any recommendations for people that don't maybe have parents, or parents aren't very close? Are there other connections outside the family or ways to get support that you can suggest to others?
In my internship, a lot of people don't have supports. So we talk about community groups like AA, NA, or like different mental health groups and stuff like that. But one thing that I've learned, the metaphor is like, you don't go to the hardware store for milk. So you need to find out like who in your life. So Peter, I go for a certain thing. Dad, I go for a certain thing. Like I wouldn't go to Peter for something that I need Dad for. But I think there's a lot of community help out there. You just need to be proactive and do that.
Key thing for me is in my caregiver role was in the United States was the NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness, has these family support groups, and there's training that's available if you're new at this process, but often just sitting around a table once a week with other family members who are dealing with similar challenges in their household, and getting the lived experience from them, and also just the comfort of knowing you're not alone, and finding out resources that are helpful. That was really huge for me, especially early on.
Yeah, that's great. And what inspired you to kind of reach out or take advantage of those resources, Craig?
Well, I got to a point where I realized I didn't know everything I needed to know, and I didn't know where to go next. And I'd always known that NAMI had these support groups, but I was really kind of grasping for straws, and so I just got involved and found it to be really wonderful and supportive. The mental illness, especially if you're not aware of how to handle it in the ways we're talking about today, it can really wreak havoc in your family. At some point the water's coming over the dams, and you think, my little bucket's not big enough. I need other people to help me get the bucket. So that's, we got there. This was probably right around the time that Peter was going into the court system, and Katharine was having some issues as well, and their mom and I were also having issues. And Katharine, you and I have access to the top minds of mental health in the world, and I was consulting with them, but it just wasn't enough to handle the day-to-day, practicalities of how to manage all this stuff. And so this kind of wisdom of the crowd, and none of these people were trained mental health professionals. They were just people who'd been working on their families for 10, 20, 30 years. And it was that kind of just everyday wisdom was just really critical. And really just, probably more than anything else, the first day I went there, people told me that I was okay. I was going to be okay. And that was something I really needed to hear at that point.
Yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I guess I was going to say the first step is like talking about it, and that can be really difficult, especially if you're unaware of what's really going on. It can be even harder to talk about it. And I think some people might be isolated, and I don't want to like act as if everybody has a support system that would be very responsive if they were to like come to, a friend with a mental health issue. Some people might not be aware still. I know that's like hard to believe in the spaces that we all operate in, but there's a large portion of people who don't know how to talk about mental health still. But I think just in my own experience and like with other loved ones, I think you'd be surprised at like the ability for our friends and family to take on these issues with us and to understand, and like the experiences that they had. Like my dad said, have we met a family without some sort of mental illness problem that they've fought? Most likely they fought silently and behind closed doors, but like the experience that they have is still there. And I think if we're more open about talking about our own issues, they will be more open, and I think we'll just help like collectively destigmatize mental health as much as we can.
Absolutely. And Craig, you've taken a lot of what you've done and really driven change, I think, within your organization, and worked alongside with others to create programming for connection in the workplace, so that it's not, such an isolated, so that if you're dealing with something in the family, you can actually get support in the workplace. Whereas I think for so long, if we're dealing with something like that, we feel that we have to keep it outside of work. You can't bring those kind of issues into work. And I think that's really transforming mental health overall. Can you share more about what you're doing at J&J to make it a more kind of inclusive and place where you can get support?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and we're still on it. Johnson & Johnson, most people used to know us as the baby company. Now you might know us as the COVID vaccine company, but we're really one of the largest healthcare companies in the world. We deal with cancer, HIV, diabetes, infant and maternal mortality, other types of issues. And so when my family was going through these mental health struggles, and I talked to our company and discovered just how big the mental health challenge is. It's actually, by some measures, bigger than the combination of cancer and diabetes and chronic respiratory disease like asthma. We sort of came together and said, well, let's try to do something really significant around mental health, like we've done for HIV. We were kind of the vanguard of changing HIV from a death sentence to now a chronic illness, and pretty soon we may have a vaccine that makes it totally preventable. So can we do the same thing for mental health? And almost as soon as we got started, the J&J employees, we were thinking externally, helping other people, other countries and whatnot. But almost immediately, the employees started coming and contacting me and saying, what about me? What about my family? And pointing out the gaps in J&J's health network or health safety net for our employees around the world. So we've actually spent a lot of our time now, as you're kind of hinting at, focus internally. How do we change the culture so people can talk about mental health? We use a lot of storytelling. We have a TEDx J&J event. We have a monthly speaker series, and we go right at it. We talk about addiction, bipolar. We have an upcoming event on schizophrenia, and obviously depression, anxiety, OCD, eating disorders. And at every one of these events, we have our employees telling their personal story, how they live with those conditions. And we always have a caregiver as well. Employees act as a caregiver. So that's really kind of normalized the conversation to a large extent, but we still have a long way to go. We're now trying to reach out to supervisors, because if your supervisor gets a little bit, nervous about your mental illness, then it affects your ability to get promoted, to get to good assignments. And so we're now doing some training across the whole enterprise on that. And then, we've discovered that, like the whole world, our mental health services that we offer are somewhat limited. So we're trying to evolve that in a direction that's building the future of mental health. So for example, when we started out, we didn't really have an employee assistance plan for every employee globally. So that was step one, is to make that available to everybody. But then, we discovered that that's really such a narrow, medical approach to mental health. And it also throws you into this, this kind of call waiting, you're waiting for weeks and months to get an appointment. And so we're now starting to look at how do we have peer support that can give you, with your fellow employees, immediate interactions, so that you can start to map out what it is you need to do. And can we start to build a network of practitioners who use evidence-based approaches? Most practitioners, Tom Insel says it's 99% of practitioners in the United States do not follow evidence-based practice. So, how can we, for our employees, make sure that they get to somebody who's at least collecting evidence about whether what they're working on, the approach they take works. And then we, hopefully get to a future where the kind of care you get in mental health is the same as you would get in cancer. So those are some of the things we're working on. It's been a lot of the stuff we couldn't have planned, 5 years ago when we started it. We just had to kind of start pushing forward and see what we learned.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an evolving space, and yet again, I just commend the company for making it so, I think, inclusive. I think talking about your mental health at work has never really been accepted, and or other people in your family or friends going through challenges. So creating resources and making them available and encouraging people to actually use them is really so important. So I'm really grateful for that. When we talk about hope and we talk about hopelessness, so hopelessness has been defined by Abramson as a feeling of despair and a sense of helplessness. So a lot of what we talk about, addiction, depression, anxiety, very high in hopelessness, and that's kind of how we tackle mental health here, is teaching the how to hope. And the first key, we talked about connections, but the first key we talk about is managing our stress response, and that it's really hard to be hopeful and problem solving and creative when we're in our stress response, our fight or flight mode, or when we're feeling really strong emotional responses. So I'm just curious, with all, you all are kind of doing different things. How are you managing your stress these days? Are there any kind of specific tips that you can give people? Are you getting triggered more these days, do you think, because of what's going on in the world? So Peter, do you want to start that?
Sure. I think learning about yourself is extremely important. Learning about what gives you anxiety, what stresses you out. Because if you don't know that, then you're just shooting at a target with your eyes closed, essentially, and a moving target at that. So I think if you're going to ask yourself tough questions and try to get to those answers, it can be so rewarding in the long term. I get really stressed about school, and before, I would just be riding this wave of anxiety, not really being hey, you have a paper due in 5 days, that's why you feel this way, or finals are coming up. And my therapist was like, hey, how about for every finals period, we just expect our stress to be at a 10, and then hopefully it'll be under that, but let's not be surprised about it anymore. And then when you figure those things out, you can be proactive in managing your stress. Let's not tell all my friends that I'm socially available when I have other things that are schoolwork or professional work that I have to take care of. So you're not, anxious about disappointing your friends, and then your work is starting to suffer. So I think, learning about what stresses you out, and then doing whatever you can to, be proactive and combat those things, I think is extremely helpful for me. Yeah.
That's great. What about you, Katharine?
I think kind of jumping off Peter, I think awareness is really important. So being aware of what stresses you out, being aware that this assignment is due, because being in grad school is like not easy, but being aware that I need my sleep, I need to eat well, I need to reach out to supports, like I need to do this, that, and the other in order to benefit my self-care. And I think what I've learned, which is a really hard lesson, is like telling people that I need help. I'm used to like keeping things to myself and be like, oh, Kathy, you can figure it out. But in most cases, that's not true. So I think, yeah, like reaching out to Dad, to Peter, to people that are really key supports, to just say like, hey, I'm struggling. How can you help? Or not even saying how can you help, but just naming the fact that I'm stressed.
Yeah, that's so important. I think knowing what people are in, we call it your Hope Network, but like really listing and identifying them and even having a conversation with them and telling them that they are that for you is, yeah, really important. So I love that you've really identified people that can support you.
Yeah.
And worked with them on what does support look like for you, because oftentimes we don't do that. So we have these expectations and they're not met, and it further frustrates us.
And Katharine, one dynamic that I think we've gotten through now is that, the first couple of times you ask for help, it feels good, but the fourth time you think, well, I'm such a loser. I keep ending up in the same spot, and I don't really want to, I want to try to solve this on my own. And I think we've gotten beyond that now that we know that, we have these basically chronic personalities and things. And so I think we're at a place, you guys, where Katharine and Peter, will be say, yeah, here I am again. I fell down. Can you give me a hand up? But we're not going to, catastrophize the fact that it happened again. We're going to say, okay, let's just get up and keep moving.
Yeah, such a good point. I know we're always, we continually fall down in life. That's a part of life. Life has so many ups and downs. And yeah, so it's such a great point, because we do tend to attach that shame, or I have attached that shame to it. And that just further gets us into a bigger kind of cycle of hopelessness. So how are you managing your stress, Craig, with all you have going on and just, so much has happened? And as you mentioned, the company is doing a lot with COVID and the vaccines and so many kind of ups and downs about that. So it's.
Yeah, I mean, there have been times in the last 20 years where it just feel like the sky was falling almost. And in many cases, there was no one else to stand up and hold a family together. Their mom, Michelle, also carried a lot of that load. But from a very young age, I mean, I always worked out. I was always very athletic, so that's been an outlet for me. I always, and through that, I had teams, hockey teams. Ice hockey is my particular passion. But I always had a bunch of people, mostly guys, but in later years, or women have been playing ice hockey. And so, just hanging on the locker room pre-pandemic was always a good place to kind of, connect with people. And one of the things I started to find out was, everybody has mental health issues in their family. I remember overhearing one of my best friends, Robert Hecht, mentioning something, whispering to somebody next to him about his daughter, and we just connected over that, and now we've created a real family around that. So social connection is really key for me. Also eating, good food and maybe not drinking as much sometimes is always a good idea. So those are some of the things, I guess. The other thing for me is super important is sleep. I mean, I'm at a strange place. Older folks tend to wake up in the middle of the night and have their thoughts kind of running off the rails. Usually thinking of all the dumb things you did that day or that week or that year or that decade, But if I lose a couple of nights of sleep in a row, then all bets are off. So I really try to make extra room to get enough sleep every night. And that necessarily, I don't set an alarm in the morning anymore. I just try to go to bed early, and then sometimes I get up at 4 a.m. and I'll go work out, and sometimes I'll get up at 7 a.m. and get right on the first Zoom for the day. But those are some of the things that help me.
And if you wake up in the middle of the night, what do you do to get back to sleep? I think a lot of people would appreciate this wisdom.
Yeah. I had one thing I did for like 20 years that worked, and lately I have to try something new every couple of days because my brain and my rumination is very tricky. It's like a virus; it mutates, But I used to do that. What do they call it, Katharine Lee-Kramer? The body where you squeeze your muscles.
Muscle relaxation.
Muscle progressive. So I do that. By the time I got up to my started to I'd be asleep, and that worked for a long time. But so I try to keep it as simple as I can. Start out with just focusing on my breathing, and every now and then that'll put me to sleep. But I tried every kind of tricks. I try to name the states in alphabetical order, and then reverse alphabetical order. The one I'm using now that I read about is you picture a place well, like a home that you lived in, and you walk through every little, almost like square inch, in a very detailed, boring sort of way, walking through your home. And I've been using the old house in Princeton as my, and that, by the time I get halfway through the house, I'm usually asleep. And then, if worst comes to worst, I'll get up and I'll, you don't want your bed to be the place where you're rooming in. You want that to be the place where you sleep and other pleasant things. So if it gets to be half an hour or so, sorry guys, the kids are supposed to be a euphemism there. But I'll get up and I'll go down and have a very dim light, read a very boring book, and then when I start finding myself yawning, I'll go back to bed at that point. But sleep is, and the rumination is, for me, as I say, it can go way back into my childhood, stupid things that I feel are stupid that I did, things I said to Katharine or Peter that I regret. Just all kinds of things, projects that are due, things that maybe I didn't tee up just right, and some, that kind of worrying. But with these kind of diversionary tactics, after about a half an hour, I'm tired and sleepy and ready to go to sleep again.
Progressive muscle relaxation. That's a good one. Yeah, sleep is a big thing. And I definitely am in the same spot. I definitely feel it when I don't. A new thing I've been doing is I've been pretending that I'm listening to the best sleep meditation ever. And like feeling the effect it has. So I'm imagining that I'm meditating to this amazing meditation. And that's been helping. So yeah, it's a big challenge. One of the other things we talk about in Hope is, and we've talked about a number of, the fifth key to hope is eliminating challenges, and rumination is a big one. So I like those strategies for that. But the third key we talk about is inspired actions. So we kind of have a vision for something in our future, something we hope for, and actions we take towards it. And sometimes we have to, towards our kind of goal, sometimes we have to re-goal, or we have to chunk down goals. Have any of you had experience with goals, having to kind of create a new goal when you were attached to one goal, or kind of strategies for dealing with overwhelm as it relates to goals?
Yeah, I think I can talk about this a little bit. I used to never set goals. I thought they were stupid. I thought you just like lived in the moment, but I think that's extremely short-sighted. But now I think it's good to like have goals at different distances. So you have goals that are like, 10 years in the future, 5 years in the future, maybe 1 year, a couple months. And then in the interim, you have goals that are like a day, every day you accomplish a goal. And I'm thinking about like going back to school. So I went to a university for like 4 years, took 2 semesters off in that 4 years, I think, maybe 3, finished with 2.4 GPA and like so many unfinished classes. And then I worked at restaurants for 5 years, and then I decided to go back to school. And that was like so terrifying for me. In part because the last experience that I had was such a catastrophe, but also just school in general has always been like this, I guess, like monster in the corner for me. So going back to school and taking it just like step by step, I just set my goals really low. My therapist was like, why don't you, because I think our family is a family of perfectionists, so we're like A's or nothing. And that, once you get a B, you just start to snowball down a hill of anxiety and catastrophizing. So I just set my goals very simple. I'm just going to go back to school and get B's, studying something that I have no connection to now, but it was just communication, media production. And then I spent like a year and a half at community college, something that I never thought I would do, but I just like try not to judge myself, try not to be too hard on myself. And then I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to like go back to a 4-year university. So I applied to one. Luckily I got in and I got like crazy financial aid. But then like the next goal was like, okay, what am I going to do after that? Deciding on like graduate school. And if you look at graduate school for psychology, there are so many different, there's like clinical mental health counseling, clinical psychology. There's so many different things that you could do, like masters, doctorates. And I just shot for doctorates because my professors were telling me that. And I was like, okay, I don't believe you, but I'll go for it. And then I got rejected by the first school that I applied to. And I went into a tailspin of, okay, what master's programs can I still apply to? And I was like reaching out to my professors who had written me recommendations. And I was like, hey, can you please write a recommendation for this master's program? They're like, wait, what happened to this plan of like doctorate programs? That's to say, like, be ready to adapt. And luckily, like, I succeeded in getting accepted. And that was like one of the best days of my life. But just taking it one day at a time, having that goal in the future that's always like informing the decisions you're making every day. And I think just having small wins is so helpful into getting that larger win, that thing that's, at the top of the mountain. And I think like having my dad and my family around me and like nobody judging me or like pressuring me in ways that I was uncomfortable with. They were just like, okay, like we trust in Peter to take control of his life, and whatever choices he makes, we'll support him. And I think like those two things have just helped me so much in the past like 5 years.
Peter, you have a great quote about Rome. You want to share that?
Sure. I think, don't quote me on this, but Steven, my brother, told me the quote is like, Rome wasn't built in a day, and people usually end there. But the full quote is something like, Rome wasn't built in a day, but a brick was laid every hour. So when we're setting out to build Rome, just remember like it takes one brick at a time. When we're setting off to like get better, it takes one step at a time, one day at a time, whatever increment that you need to like put your life into to help you get just a little bit farther. So helpful. And not to like sweat taking steps backwards, because that's just like we've talked about, that's just part of life. To accept that and just embrace it. Like, I don't know. I love life now. It's so weird to say that, but yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's a fantastic illustration of goals and how goals work and how we have to be flexible and adaptable, and it's not a straight journey, and so, and it's good to have that vision, but not be so tightly held on to it that if it doesn't come true, you can't kind of find new paths and new ways. So Katharine, what about you? Do you want to talk about goals at all? Maybe as it relates to recovery or?
Yeah, so I tend to like look at my goals in like a big picture, and I'm like, okay, 10 years down the line, Katharine, this is where you are. And that just does not serve me well. So I think what Peter said about like breaking it down into, okay, I do it week by week. So I have like a schedule of like, okay, this week, Kathryn, this is what you're going to accomplish. Next week, we'll look at that next week. Because if I kind of like look out into the big picture, I get really overwhelmed. And then procrastination starts happening, anxiety starts happening. And so if I can just do like today, this is what I'm going to do. Tomorrow, this is what I'm going to do. Which is hard. It's easier said than done, but I'm trying to do that better.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's different for different people. And so I think it's so important that those listening like work on what works for you. Because different, for some people, they need that 10-year plan. For others, that is just completely stressful and overwhelming, like you said. And then we get into our freeze mode where we don't do anything. We feel worse about ourselves. We ruminate, and it just gets down that cycle for us. So I think those are,
especially like with my eating disorder and depression, it's like, Katharine, you're going to be recovered in X amount of time. You're going to be happy in X amount of time. That's not realistic. It's like, what are you going to do this week to like better yourself and towards recovery? Okay, that makes sense. But let's not look so many years down the line and create this unrealistic expectation of where I'm supposed to be.
Absolutely. And as someone in, recovery from addiction, I just, sometimes it's what can I do for this minute, to further and to get myself through this and then when I mess up, to not internalize that and think, oh, I'm a failure. I'll never do this. I can't, self-compassion and self-forgiveness is equally important.
And Kathryn and I have been talking about procrastination lately. Because when we procrastinate, we tend to beat ourselves up and say, this is terrible. But I sent her a podcast by Adam Grant, the organizational psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania, where he says actually procrastination, if you look at the data, they've done social science experiments, procrastination can be reframed as actually a process of innovation, that you're giving yourself space to. So if you view it as not a negative and beat yourself up and knock yourself down, but say, okay, look, and first of all, everybody procrastinates at some level. But you sort of lean into that and say, I'm just going to actually enjoy the procrastination and see what comes out of it. And Kathryn had a couple of papers due the other weekend, and I don't know how you navigate through that, but everything got done and it went well, I guess, right?
Somehow, yeah.
Is that a TED Talk? Is that a TED Talk that you're talking about?
No, he wrote a book, and it might be on his. It's on several podcasts. Adam Grant has a work-life podcast. I think he has one episode on the procrastination. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Do it to the whole group.
Yeah. And what about you and goals, Craig?
Yeah, I know people who have spreadsheets about every minute of the day, and when I was a lawyer, I had to fill out every 6 minutes of my time, to a client. I'm so glad I don't do that anymore. I guess I have kind of a broad brush set of strategies and goals. And I think Peter's, I always try to have a short, medium, and long term. But again, nothing written in stone. My favorite projects at work, and I've worked in many different places, not just Johnson & Johnson, but the ones that I find most rewarding are the ones I actually don't put on my goals and objectives for the year. So my boss is not saying, well, what about X? And in fact, the whole mental health thing was kind of a side hustle that sort of turned into something wonderful. And I had the freedom to experiment and just kind of poke around when I had a chance to work on it. So I think it's important not to, you had it right, Kathryn Goetzke, everybody's different. And some people thrive with a really structured and planned out. I'm probably in the middle somewhere. I think it's important to have an idea where you're trying to go. But I also like to enjoy the flowers along the way and be open to serendipity. I go through spurts where I do that thing where I'm going to say yes to anything that comes in the door, especially if I haven't done it before. But I can't do that for very long, but I'll do it for a little while. So.
Love that. Oh my gosh, this has been so inspiring and helpful and informative and touching. It's really amazing to see how you all are doing and what you're up to. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners about your own personal journey, or things you can think of for others that might help that are struggling right now, or anything in the family or that we didn't touch on?
I can talk about just, and I tried to like get in this mindset when I feel like I might be taking things for granted, but there was a large period of my life where I didn't think that like growth or change was possible, and I was just like giving up, like passively living my life in a way that I just thought would like end prematurely, or I just didn't think that I had what it took to change. And I got arrested. I got basically kicked out of the school that I went to. And I was forced, the next thing I did was like get a job at Chipotle, where I had to wake up at 4:45 in the morning. And I was like, okay, I guess this is my life now. But with like a really good therapist. And I think I don't know, I think we've all been in therapy, and it can take a while to find the right therapist. It took me, I think, like 8 tries to find the right one. With the right therapist, with familial support, with self-reflection and self-understanding, like I'm doing things that I thought were impossible. And if I could like bottle this up and help other people manifest this in their lives, I would. And I think that's like kind of what I'm trying to do. And I also want to like take the time to acknowledge the fact that, we all are coming here from like a point of privilege. There's so many people out there that like have no support system, no hope. They're not having like their very basic needs met. And like, how do we expect those people to like also deal with their mental health? So I like will absolutely devote some portion of my time when I'm like licensed and certified to like bring care to people who just can't access it. And I think I know that like that's definitely part of everyone's mission here, but I just felt like I should say that out loud.
Yeah, absolutely. Access to care is a major barrier to people's, mental health and recovery, and something I know globally we've been working on, and absolutely needs to be prioritized. I mean, as you can see, mental health impacts everything in our lives and our ability to kind of move forward. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. Really important. And cool that you're going to be supporting, those in need too. So what a great way to give back. What about you, Katharine?
Kind of echoing Peter, like, don't give up. It's really difficult to ask for help. And that's been my biggest struggle, is to say like, hey, things aren't going that well. Can someone help me? Because I like to think that I can do it by myself. And one thing that I'm working through school and with the Eating Disorders Coalition is to get medical nutrition therapy covered by Medicare Part B. So I don't know if I can send you the link for people to kind of like sign up to help with that. But so like psychiatry therapy and medical care is covered for people with eating disorders, but for some reason dietitian is not. And I can't tell you, Dad can tell you how much we've spent on my therapy. Yeah, so if I could just send you that link and maybe get people involved into kind of backing that initiative, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, happy to. And we'll share that link, and happy to promote it on our channels as well. It's incredible. And yeah, as you said, it's so expensive to get help, and it's hard to find the right providers, and it's, you know, there are so many obstacles and barriers. And when you are in crisis and when you need support, it's a brave action to even ask for it. You know, we've talked about how hard it is to even do that. And so then when you're willing to do that and you can't find treatment or support, or it's too expensive, I mean, it just brings you down that further cycle of kind of hopelessness. And so it's great that you're working to, you know, bring access. So that's amazing.
Thanks, Kat.
Yeah. What about you, Craig?
Well, you know, one of the things that surprised me the most when I started looking into this was that this is a global problem. There's no country that does this well. Even the European socialized medicine countries, and obviously in the more developing countries, they have a lot of the same problems. So, you know, we need to address stigma and awareness everywhere. We've got to start integrating mental health and just part of regular health care. You got to provide some kind of insurance coverage for it. And we still have a lot of research to do, both on the, you know, the talk therapy and all the mobile apps, but also on the biology of the brain. It is a global issue that we can all join together, and you, Kathryn Goetzke, are helping lead that in a vibrant way with your yellow dresses and sunflowers and your podcast. We love that. And it's also, you know, it's also very intersectional. You know, Kathryn, my daughter Kathryn, is working now with veterans, and we've done some of that within our own community. You know, there's PTSD and there's suicide risk in that community. The LGBTQ community has multiple you know, vulnerabilities, including bullying and a high suicide rate. African Americans, Asian Americans now, with all of the systemic racism and anti-COVID stuff that's going on. And then around the world, you see the same kind of you know, experiences that people are having. It's starting to sound like maybe this is a big thing that's too hard to lift. But what I've been encouraged by, and I know Kathryn Goetzke, you have too, is just that all these voices are finally coming together, and we're starting to, you know, build a movement. We're being part of a movement that is going to make the change, I think. And the fact that all three of my kids are now in mental health, when 5 years ago none of us were doing anything well, is, I think, an indicator of that. And I think for each one of us, it's been rewarding in its own way, and that's how we keep coming back.
That's amazing. Yeah. And one of the things we know about hope is active, right? So it's, you have to feel good and then you have to take action. So moving from that hopelessness to hope, and taking kind of what I call the lived experience of hopelessness and moving it to action. And I think, Craig, to your point, it can seem quite overwhelming, and can lead to additional hopelessness when you think of the big picture and the number of challenges. And I think that's when we have to take those micro steps and chunk it down. And as Kathryn mentioned, you know, really small, what can we do kind of now and move the needle forward? So, wow, it's so amazing. You guys are all doing such incredible work. And it is wild to think that 5 years ago you weren't in this space, and just how much you all are contributing and doing. And I think, to me, and Craig, I don't know about you, but the younger generation has taken on, I think, mental health and being proactive and outspoken about needs and the change that really needs to happen, kind of must happen to move the world forward, keeps me in the space and going and inspired and engaged and active myself in it. So thank you all so much for joining. I can't wait to share this. Yeah, I think it's a great model. I'm really interesting to hear from the family perspective, and I'm grateful that you're also open about it. I think that'll help a lot of people too, encouraging them to be more open and engaged in the family.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kathryn Goetzke, thank you. And Katharine Lee-Kramer, thank you for suggesting that we try to do this as a family. This has been kind of fun.
I know. Awesome. And thank you, all you listeners, for listening in. Be sure to share this with your networks. And we'll put the link in that Katharine shared about the eating disorder. So get engaged in that as well. As we said, Hope is definitely active, and we all need to support these efforts and try to move the needle forward so that all get the help that they need and absolutely deserve. So thanks for listening in.
So thank you all for listening in to the Hope Matrix podcast. We want to shine a light that hope is teachable, hope is measurable and teachable, and provide you with actionable insights for how you can start activating hope in your life today, and provide a framework so you can start talking about hope with other people and practice these skills together, because we are better with hope. Please feel free to check out theshinehopecompany.com, where we list all of our resources around how to hope. We have a lot of free programs for how to hope, including the 5-day challenge, our hope infographic with a lot of skills that showcase how to hope, and articles of how to incorporate hope into your life. We have the Hope Beat Weekly, which is a weekly newsletter that shares strategies for hope. We have a My Hope Story template, so you can write your own hope story today. Also, My Hope Heroes, so we can share what our heroes are doing to activate hope in their lives. And this is especially good with youth, so they can start looking up to people that have overcome similar challenges to them and seeing how these heroes use the Shine Hope framework. We have a Hopeful Minds for Teens program, a Hopeful Minds overview, educator guides. We have a new evidence-based college course, so you can activate hope on the college campus. There are programs in the workplace, overview courses, 90-minute courses for learning the what, why, and how to hope. What I want you to know about hope is it's a skill. You've got to practice these skills to become hopeful. It's easy to fall into despair and helplessness when we deal with challenges in life, and it takes intentional work and practice to get to hope. And yet it is always possible. So no matter what life brings, keep shining hope. Thanks so much for listening in. Have an awesome day. And of course, I've got to add that this program is designed to assist you in learning about hope. It should not be used for medical advice, counseling, or other health-related services. I, Fred, the Shine Hope Company, and myself, Kathryn Goetzke, do not endorse or provide any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. I am not a medical doctor. The information provided here should not be used for the diagnosis or treatment of any medical condition, and cannot be substituted for the advice of physicians, licensed professionals, or therapists who are familiar with your specific situation. Consult a licensed medical profession or call 911 if you are in need of immediate assistance. And be sure to know the crisis hotline, 988, if you are in need of support. Thanks a bunch for listening. Take good care of yourself and keep shining hope.